I want to start this episode by saying that the title and the topic of this episode isn't an attack on living in the present moment and sort of the act of surrendering to a greater peace and trusting a higher alignment. I do think these things are important. They're actually extremely valuable and they shouldn't be abandoned or, turned a blind eye to at all. Actually, they should be incorporated in a very sort of radical way. We should accept the things we can't control. We should surrender to a higher sort of grander picture and orchestration of how things are going on. But I think we can take this too far, and then which we realize we say, I want the universe to just flow me and take me wherever I'm meant to be. And I think there's a bit of nuance to that, right? Because if you just let the current take you, then you have no say in the matter. And maybe you'll end up somewhere interesting, maybe you'll end up somewhere spontaneous, but it might not be somewhere you actually want to be. The point, in my opinion, is to cultivate a presence, to cultivate a surrendering to the flow of life, but to sort of maneuver ourselves and surf the waves of that flow, to sort of direct our energy into somewhere that is quite intentional. I went through a phase of my life where, I kind of didn't care about anything. It was kind of after realizing and pondering the imaginary nature of a lot of the things that we play into in life. But a thing that I found is that, you can't not care about anything. It's not really within us as humans. And I think it leads to a sort of unsatisfactory state of mind and frankly, an unsatisfactory life. Because I think what we'll find is that it's actually a defense mechanism for something that's much deeper and something that might even touch on the inner child in a way. And this is kind of the only part of the episode where I'll touch on something psychological, I guess, in relation to the inner child. And that is when we were younger, maybe we showed a lot of effort, we showed a lot of care for things, and we were forced into playing it cool. We were forced into, holding our cards closer to our chest because our effort and our caring and our passion was not met with the proper value that maybe we wanted it to. And this isn't anybody's fault. If you are quote unquote too intense for another person, this doesn't make you objectively too intense. It makes you subjectively too intense for them. And you could be not intense enough for another person. So I think we develop this sort of nonchalant, I don't really care what happens attitude in response to a lot of the things that happened in our past. And now when we take it to the next level where we say, whether from a spiritual, philosophical, or whichever perspective, we say, I'm just going to let the sort of flow guide me. And to that I say, yes, but maybe 50% let it guide you, and the other 50% let you guide it, because we can't attribute too much sort of emphasis to the way things play out. Because if you just let things play out as it were from the day you were born to the day you are put to rest, then you will find a life that was completely not of your own accord, right? We like to think that if we just let it flow, we'll end up where we're supposed to be, but there's not really much to support that. And actually, it seems that though most people who have gotten to where they wanted in life have said that they did trust a bigger picture, they did trust a grander orchestration in relation to the universe and life flowing in a certain way, but they also led with direction, they also led with intention. I thought for a while it was cool to not care. I thought for a while it was cool to just go with the flow of things and not really put too much effort and intention into anything. And I quickly realized I was lying to myself because that's not what you really want. You want certain things out of life. And a lot of times we surrender the need for those things, not because we don't want them, but because we don't believe in ourselves enough that we believe we are capable enough of obtaining them. And we relinquish the desire, not because we truly believe it's hurting us, but because we believe our life will be processed and our existence will be a lot easier if we relinquish that higher ambition for something much more minuscule. It's a very common philosophical concept where they say, want less and your life will feel like more, want more constantly and your life will feel like less. This concept is inherently true, but if we use it and attribute it to everything, it's quite dishonest. Because if you have nothing, Is it so wrong then to feel like you have nothing? No, I don't think it is. I think it's relatively dismissive to say that we can have nothing and be happy when maybe the very relationship that you have with yourself as you grow, as you evolve, in going for the things that you do want, in going after what you're passionate about, is part of the life experience. It's part of the unfolding of who you are. It's part of, as the years go by, your passions change and your wantings change. And it's a sort of experience of when to cultivate stillness, when to let go, when to surrender, and also when to be relentless, when to pursue, and when to be a driving force for the things that you want. But yeah, there was a point in my life where I did kind of carry this attitude of whatever happens, happens. It's, whatever is will be. And I think that's an okay attitude for some situations. But I did feel, and it revealed to myself that I was lying to myself. And, you know, I can only speak for myself here, but I am or have been quite calculated. And it is because there is a calculation to my actions and to my words and to my choices that I have direction and that I can actually choose in which way my life will go. We don't want to seem too intellectual sometimes because we just want to seem, quote unquote, the life of the party. We just want to go with the flow. We want to be that person who's always up for anything. And I think we can borrow from that mindset without completely eliminating the factors that are probably the most driving force for the life that we want. The life that you're looking for and becoming the person that you want to be, it's not going to be found completely out of letting go. Letting go is the after effect. You do the things you want. You do the sort of work that you believe will lead to either an identity transformation, changing who you are, or something that's in pursuit of your passion or your purpose, whatever it may be. You do the work, you put in the effort, and you let go of how the end result will look because you did everything in your control. That's what it is. But if you're not doing anything, period, nothing's going to happen. And I know it's very easy to say that, this isn't us and we don't do this, but I'm giving a more major example and I'm exemplifying an attitude that is probably quite rare and quite stagnant that maybe most of you don't have. But I think we all can feel a part of ourselves that clings to this sort of attitude. We want for things to just be very easy flowing, and we believe that if we can just find a way to shut our minds off, if we can just find a way to find that inner stillness, that we can just let life sort of pass through us in a sort of peaceful manner. And to that I say, it probably is possible. But what would be the point in that? What would be the purpose in letting it all pass by you? Can we not be the observer and also a participant of the game of life? Why exist if not to play? Why exist just to observe? Why not exist to play? And I think this is very innate in us. Children play, young animals play. When we start to look at things in two different ways, either play or observance, we see a very distinct difference and we see the sort of yin and yang, or at least from my perspective, of a way of living life. You can come to a default of two modes, and this is something I like to do, where depending on the situation, I can call on two different states of beings. If it's time to process something extremely difficult, if it's time to experience and observe difficult emotions, then we can call on that surrender. We can call on that stillness and we can let go. And we can sort of, in that same way, let life, let emotions, let thoughts pass through us. But then when it's time to play, in any regard, play is not just positive, play is negative. Play is engagement with life. When it's time to play, we should play. Because I think a lot of times we find that we're asking a lot of reality, but what are we giving? If we're not playing, if we're not creating, if we're not, finding new ideas and doing all that we can to bring it to fruition, if we're not using our imagination, if we're not being creative, if we're not pursuing our passion, our purpose, if we're not trying to make something of the relatively and inherently blank canvas that we've been given in life, then what is there for reality to play with? What is there for reality to respond to if no appropriate actions are being taken? Do you want to experience the stream of consciousness that exists and that we know to be life? And I'm not trying to go overly spiritual or philosophical here. I'm saying something relatively practical, and that is, if you don't make your own decisions, if you don't make your own choices, if you don't choose the type of person you will be, if you don't choose the type of life you want, and then go and try to pursue it and get it, then you're going to always neglect a part of yourself, an ambition, a hunger, a drive that is not going to be satiated by the void. The void is always there. You can always sit in stillness. You can always observe your thoughts. You can always observe your emotions. But where you are right now is special. The certain time of your life, the people around you, wherever you are, that's unique. That's one of a kind. So I don't think we should attach to stillness and observance and surrender and letting go as a means of an overall philosophy of life. I actually think it should be the backbone. It should be the sort of pillow that we can come back to when we've had a quote unquote long night out. And what I mean by this is, if we had a long week and we haven't had much time to reflect, then we can come back. We can sit in meditation. We can allow the feelings to be felt. We can allow the thoughts to pass by. And we don't need to make it our whole life. We don't need to make surrender our entire life. Because I would actually say that there are multiple things to surrender to. Why does someone want to learn the guitar? Why does someone fall in love with singing? Why does someone obsess over writing poetry? What is it within them that instills this innate desire to do these purposeful and passion-filled things? Can we not surrender to that? And I think for any of you who have experienced a sort of flow state in anything, sports, arts, whatever it may be, maybe just living life, then you'll realize that the thing you're looking for in stillness, the thing you're looking for in letting go and surrendering and being one with the flow, you can find that in the very act of doing a lot. You could find that in being so busy that you almost lose yourself in life. And I think from my experience, when I am lost, I am found, because in the very moments where I was confused, in the very moments where I got kind of caught in the swing of things, whether for good or for bad, at that very next corner was a realization, was an epiphany, was a sort of stillness that I can come back to that allowed me to see that there was value in being lost. There was value in pursuing something and maybe being wrong. There was value in making mistakes. There's value in feeling embarrassed. There's value in all of these things. And I think to have this nonchalant attitude of whatever happens, happens, is to neglect the very point and purpose of life. And I do think we can embrace both the yin and the yang, or the yin and the yang. Snap. I'm recording this live, so I really, is it yin and yang or yin and yang? I'm not sure, but you guys know what I mean. Two polarities of the same sort of practice. One where in meditation there's a certain stillness, there's a certain inner observance, and the other where that same surrender is being found in the activities of life, whether that be a craft, whether that be anything. It doesn't matter, because the flow is everywhere. You can surrender to it anywhere and everywhere. Even in your ambition, even in your passion, there is that same flow. One can even argue that the instilled desire for the things that you want can be almost dropped down from a higher perspective. Maybe your future self is leaving you breadcrumbs for the life that you want. And to say it is what it is, whatever happens will happen, is a sort of turning a cold shoulder to who reality is kind of flirting with you to become. And this is something I've experienced a lot, is that when you start making moves on the path, when you start doing things that truly excite you, that truly make you feel empowered, all of a sudden life becomes very synchronous. There's synchronicities everywhere. And it almost feels like reality is flirting with you into walking just a bit further. It'll give you a sign and it'll say, Or it'll give you a minor reward and it'll say, walk just a bit further. And then again, walk just a bit further. And you'll see that you can actually surrender to that. When we say surrender, it doesn't mean forego all of life's responsibilities. It doesn't mean forego all of the difficulties of life. It actually means surrender to a higher desire for what you want your life to look like and what you want your life to be and who you want to be. From a practical perspective, the people who are always too cool, the people who are always too nonchalant, those are the people that also end up living with the most regret. Because they might be cool temporarily. They might, I don't know, be the spotlight because of their uniform fit into life. But those are the people who end up living with the most regret because they don't ever give themselves the chance to express themselves in a deep way. And from what I've seen, older people, or rather people who are closer to nearing the other side, always say a very similar thing. I wish I lived more. Isn't that the commonality in a lot of the, I guess, elder reflections that we see on the internet or that we read about? They say, I wished I lived more. What does that mean? I wish I lived. They don't say, I wish I observed more. They don't say, I wish I surrendered more, which, these two can mean the same thing in a sec, but they say, I wish I lived more. I wish I made more mistakes. I wish I told that person I liked them and then cried about it at night. I wished I danced and had an extra drink. I wish I, whatever, you know? And I'm not promoting drinking or anything like that. It's just kind of what came off the tongue. But you have to live. And in living, in opening your eyes wide and saying, I'm alive and the world around me is alive too. When you engage so deeply, when you engage so intentionally and authentically, there is a reward for you. You will be rewarded. You will not be rewarded for being able to observe it. You will not be rewarded for noticing how you fit in a group setting, but you will be rewarded for taking intentional action, for making conscious choices towards the life you want. You will be rewarded for feeling that awkward, tense, sort of sticky wall that stands in your way as you go to the middle of the dance floor and dance. That's the point of life. That's how you live. When you live like that, things become synchronous. Things start to fall into place. And can I tell you the science of why? No. But if you want to experience it, go ahead. But what I will say, and to wrap up this episode, is that not caring has done very little for me, but caring a little bit extra has done a lot. The hurting that can come from caring too much is a very small price to pay than caring about many things deeply. Caring about your life deeply to the point where doing anything other than something you're passionate about, doing anything other than something that fills you with purpose almost repels you because you understand that life is too short. It is too short. I need to live. I need to live. In living, in participating, in engaging with reality and seeing how it responds, I will become fulfilled. Maybe not now as I walk the path, maybe not in 2 years as the road seems ever longer and further, but I know that in the processes of every day, in becoming new versions of myself, I will continuously lose and find myself. And there is purpose, there is joy in that, just like there is joy in a roller coaster. And the point is not to hand our ticket back in and not go on the ride. It's to see the purpose of the ride and still enjoy it. It's to see that the ride will eventually end. It's to see that the ride is just for fun in the grand scheme of things, but it's still worth it. It's worth living. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link in the description to my book if you guys want to check it out. It's filled with more info like this. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.